Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you can hear me with no problem and there you have a good connection with the sound. Welcome, everyone, for this very short webinar, and we're going to talk about scenarios for the future. It's going to be linked with future studies, so with something that I do on a daily basis with my research and the life after coronavirus. My name is David Kalisz, and for those who don't know me yet, for some people who maybe see me for the first time, I'm associate professor at Paris School of Business, and I wanted to share with you some of the perspectives linked with coronavirus, something that everyone's talking about right now, and I want to share some fresh information with you, some models that will be used in order to understand the situation a little bit, I would say, more from more structured way. So welcome everyone again. So when we talk about the life after coronavirus, we have to think about the future. Part of the future studies that I'm linked with, it's about, generally speaking, about not necessarily predicting, but looking for the scenarios for the future. To do this, to be quite honest, we have to say that humans don't have the power to know the future, but in the thousands of years of human history, we've never been able to stop trying to imagine it. So, of course, we don't think about the future when everything goes fine, when everything goes great, when we see the growth all around us, but the situation is getting a little bit more complicated when something bad happens, when some economical shock is around us, and this is the situation that we are in. And to be able to understand the future, we're going to be focusing on something that we call in future studies a new normal. New normal is looking possibility to look for different types of signals in the external environment. So signals are some specific examples about the future in present. That's a quotation from Marina Gobbins that comes from a document that is called 5 Characteristics of Professional Futurists. So it's a clue about something that's going to become different, and we're trying to figure out how different. So signals are not trends necessarily. Normally we mess up trends with fads. Fad, it's something that emerges and really quick and then disappears from the environment really quick. And trends in general, they need much longer time to establish, to be seen in the long-term perspective. And one of the foresight and movie scenario writer, William Gibson, when we can see it on the right, had a quotation that told us that basically the future is already here, but it's not evenly distributed. It's not evenly distributed because there always have been this differentiator between poor and rich, and today it's a little bit more vivid simply because this economical shock that we're right now in gives us totally different perspective to look for the future. What changed in the last few weeks is that we work remotely. So we were kind of forced to stay at home, to do the job differently, to be able to convert our areas of life in a completely different way. And why are we doing this? We're doing this for only one reason, to be quite honest: to flatten the curve. Flattening the curve, where you can see on the graph right here, it's about showing the maximum capacity of the health system to be ready to not to collapse, because normally the system, the healthcare system, for example, is the same as the banking systems. When it's about economical shocks, it's working until some amount of people using it. Imagine there's some defined number of people using the healthcare system, but if all of the sudden 100 times more or 1,000 times more people want to use it, it could collapse. So that's why we have to think about staying at home and flattening the curve. And this, I would say, global experiment, which is lockdown, it's of course making our life more difficult, and making our life more difficult, it's making our work more difficult. So what I wrote a couple of weeks ago when I worked with my students in exactly the same course about foreseeing the future, I said that the coronavirus will accelerate the digitization very fast way, more than any previous driver. And some of these new behavioral patterns will have lasting impact on our society and working world. That means that we'll see in the long run some kind of changes that are seen on a daily basis, and our patterns of behavior will change as well. There was a research conducted a few weeks ago, and that was at the end of March, to see whether the people are ready to go digital right away and within a few days. That's what we're doing right now. A couple of weeks ago, we would have to find a room, book our time, book our tickets to be able to do this webinar. We would have to meet face to face. Today, we do it differently. Interestingly, 84% of people, of the respondents who took part in the research, are using a new digital product or service for the very first time. Although those solutions like Blackboard Collaborate that we're using right now, or Microsoft Teams or Zoom, they exist for years. We haven't done a lot of work to use them a lot, but today we have to. So our patterns of behaviors is changing. And a couple of other elements, 34% of people are using medical healthcare online for the very time. 33% of students are learning online way for the very first time. And almost also 1/3 is 29% of employees are using the specialized software to be able to differently. So what about scenarios to think that economy in general has different types of shocks? And what I see in these articles, business press, because everyone's talking about coronavirus. On average, we spend almost 2 hours of searching for the updates due to coronavirus. And I see in many cases that a lot of scientists talk about the black swan. The black swan is a management concept that basically is linked with something that can be predicted, but has a profound. Those events are improbable, but if they happen, they have tremendous consequences. Those consequences can be good, can be bad. It's a concept developed by Nassim Taleb, book Black Swan, published in 2007. I personally disagree with that simply because there's another concept of Michelle Wucker. She published a book in 2016, but for the very first time, she introduced in Davos on Economic Forum in 2013 the concept of gray rhinos. And this is something that is in the opposition of the black swans. Why is it in the opposition? Because it's some known economic risks that people choose not to act on, although it has very potential harm. So those events are highly probable with great and tremendous consequences, but those are the events that we sometimes deny or forget that they can happen. So we choose not to react on this. We have to say that the pandemic scenarios, especially in futurist studies, is it's not a new thing. We've already went through the scenarios like this. So I do believe that it's not a black swan, but it's a great rhino that shows our perspective in a different way. Over a month ago, one of the very professional futurists in Holland, Lee Edelkoort, published a very interesting article that shows how our life will change. And I will share you one of the quotation from that interview. And she said that I think that we should be grateful for the virus because it might be the reason we survived as species. So she says that we're going to be nicer, we're going to be caring more, we're going to change our patterns of behavior, we're going to become more local, less global, we're going to consume less. I'm not that positive, to be quite honest. If it's about my decision, what I personally think what would happen, I think that those changes are not because people don't change overnight. Our patterns of behavior also don't change overnight. This new kind of reality that we're going to face soon shows us that future can be very different. And in our research about future studies, We always use a framework created States in Institute for the Future Institute in Palo Alto in California, that is called Envisioning the Future, which shows that there could be 4 different possible future, 4 different alternatives. The first one, maybe I'm going to mark them out so you're going to be able to see what I'm talking about. The first one is growth. So the future is better than I expect. Something changes in some better way. The second scenario is the collapse. So the future is worse than I expect and everything goes wrong. Sometimes we have constraints. Those constraints sometimes are linked with so-called adaptation. So we have to adapt to a new situation because of some huge event or something, some shock in the external environment. So it's a constraint. The future is just what I expect. But we can think about the most challenging scenario, and I'm gonna mark it in blue. That's a transformation. The transformation means that the future is very different, what I think. And 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago, there was a Dutch scientist, Dutch economist who published this book, which is available in French. So I'm really recommending to read it, which is called Giantism. He said the future will be smaller, slower, and more human. In his research, there's a lot of talks about how we will be more human in the entire process. Again, this is a positive scenario that our pattern of behavior will be some kind of better. We'll understand each other better. We're going to go more offline than online, but everything was moved into online. So it's hard to believe that this is exactly going to happen. So in the second part of the presentation, I gave you the quick introduction, how we approach the future. I want to share with you some of the perspective, how these 4 scenarios would go. And I'll give you, through the next 10 minutes, a brief overview how the future could be able to approach us. And the last couple of minutes, we'll wait for the discussion. I see that there's 50 of you over here, so that's quite nice that you joined me here. Our first scenario is the growth. So we have to think about the positive side. What's positive? 3 things that I see right here in a very clear way. Number 1, technology, moving the life into the web, automation. A lot of jobs would be automated faster than ever before because this is how many industries change right now. And Political magazine on 19th March created amazingly interesting approach of the futurist scenarios for life after the coronavirus. And previously we asked ourselves a question, is there a reason to do something online if I can meet someone and do it face to face? But today we ask the question completely different way, the opposite way. We say that, is there any logical reason why would I do it face to face? We say that if I could do it online, I don't want to take any risk. So the growth could be linked with unlimited consumption. We'll see huge growth in e-commerce, huge changes. For example, normally we had 14 days to send back our product. Right now, many companies give us 100 days, and we were not going to want to give it up after the coronavirus finishes. And something that we're waiting for, the COVID vaccine. Johnson & Johnson published recently from their R&D department the information that the vaccine will be ready for sales in early 2021, but first we have to do the test. The tests are being scheduled for autumn, and we'll see if this is the nice future that we can see after the COVID-19. The opposite is collapse, of course. We see huge downturn linked with GDP forecast. I gave you the example from Poland simply because I'm Polish and it's minus 4.6, but I checked this morning the data for France from World Economic Bank that was published a couple of days ago, and from France it's even deeper because it's minus 7.2. For those of you who studied economics, you should know that the recession is a period in economics where the GDP growth is negative for at least 2 quarters in a row. So it's too early to talk about it right now, but the prognosis, the forecasts say that probably this is what we're going to face. And what happens in the United States? A few days back, we had confirmation from the US government that there was 22 forms filled for unemployment in 4 weeks. 22 million people that declared that they lost their jobs. Supervision. Definitely, you know, all of you know Yuval Harari, who wrote this amazing book like Homo Deus or Sapiens. He wrote an article in Financial Times. I'm also inviting you to have a look. It's access is for free, although Financial Times is paid. He said that the algorithms will know that maybe we're sick before we know it, and they will follow us, they will track us, they will know where we go, who we meet. So that's kind of second collapse scenario, that we're going to completely lose our privacy. The third thing is the oil price. If you follow the economic news from this week, you'll see that the oil price fell below 0 per barrel, and Texas oil was negative, minus $37. That's, I found this information in Le Monde on 21st April. This shows our perspective for completely unprecedented way. But we can move to some kind of constraints. Constraint is the element that allows us to think from different perspective and different perspective on our different areas of life. Number one, we will face caring about planet a little bit more. So zero waste, elimination of plastics. We can see it in France since January, but I believe that we will see these tendencies more vivid. You will see what's happening in Venus, how the water is becoming clearer, how the air is becoming clearer in China. Safety, again, world experiment, but it's 6th week that we're in isolation. That can cause a long impacts on our mental health. Depression, some problems with our mental health. Same thing about funds. We will consume less because we will have less money during the crisis. We'll consume less for sure. And today we consume less because we're locked down. And we will see also the huge increase in virtual non-contact or contactless payments. Some countries already, like Poland, for example, raised up by 100% up the limit of contactless payments. So as we have 30 euros in France right now, maybe it's going to be 60 euros or 100 euros with contactless payments. We don't know, but we can assume that these changes will happen. Some countries, like the US, like Poland, also have these crazy ideas that maybe we should move voting, presidential voting, to correspondence voting or voting online. But again, what about our data? What's about our protection? What's about our safety? This causes a lot of problems for the approaching the future for different types of perspective. But maybe none of the scenarios will happen, and we're going to face the transformation. The transformation is something that I wanted to close the presentation with. The transformation means that maybe it's about time that we don't measure our country performance using only economical indicators about GDP, GDP growth, GDP per capita, budget balance, inflation rate. Maybe not the way we should measure our performance. And OECD created a Better Life Index that takes into account 11 different factors that are not economic. Then it's about housing, it's about how happy we are, what kind of jobs we have, how safe we are, what's our access to healthcare. And all of these scenarios have to be taken into account to see it from a different perspective. Our mentality, I believe, might change as well. More human relations. We're going back to offline world. So the concept, if anyone's linked with marketing, you've definitely heard about JOMO, which is the contrary of FOMO, which is joy of missing out. I'm happy that I can be offline, returning to again some kind of slower pace on our life, and maybe searching for your local suppliers, local supplies, local economy, less global, more local. And Institute for the Future, Bob Johansen, who just published his yesterday his new book about turbulent world. We're all living in so-called a VUCA world, the world which is very volatile, is very uncertain, is very complex, and it's very ambiguous. And that allows us to have a different perception on these elements linked with approaching the world from a different perspective. But what we're facing now, and we see everywhere in the world, and especially here in Paris, where we are right now, we can something that I call a great empty. And I hope that this empty will be replaced very soon with a human face-to-face relation. This is my quick overview of the trends linked with coronavirus future. We have something around 10 minutes left, and I'm gonna show back again our first title slide with the coronavirus. First of all, I wanted to thank three groups of people. I want to thank our dean to make this webinar happen. So Armand Derry, thank you very much for allowing us to meet here to talk about it. I want to thank our academic dean, Eger Gapteni, for supporting me to make this happen. And I wanted to thank also Julie Tesson, who was working on everything and making sure that we don't have any technical issues and that everything works fine. And I'm looking at your questions right now. If you have I see a question from Ruksham, alternative about the future. Do I think it would be different for everyone, like some get heights and more get lows? And Mary Claire Mrajan asked me, do people want to deconfine or they're going to be afraid? I believe that even if everything opens on 11th May, our perception will be different, because even if you will have access to go to the theater, go to the gym, go to the cinema, we're gonna have to double check, think it over again. Do I really have to do this? Do I really have to be in a couple of hundreds of unknown people in exactly the same closed space? Or do I really want to take that trip on train or plane, and I'm gonna spend a couple of hours close with people that I don't know? I think that our pattern of behavior will change. I think that we're gonna be very afraid of human contact again. Some of the solutions are in technical solutions, and with technology around us, there is a huge trend which is called human tech and human touch. That means some of the senses that we have, those senses in future studies and with artificial intelligence, they are called qualia. That means that we give the perception of our senses to the technology, and new forms of technology, especially linked with augmented reality and virtual reality, will give us this perspective to feel, although there is no face-to-face interaction. I have a question about restriction and mass are not tested in the pandemic. Well, it's not possible to test masses on a huge scale, because as I said in the graphics about how efficient is the health system, I do believe that the countries are doing their best to make it happen. And of course, in more controlled countries like China, it's much easier to lock everything down and to force people to do something. And in Western Europe, in democratic countries, it's very hard to make it. That's why we had quite long decision to lock down France or lock down UK, simply because people are used to living in free society. Where they can do what they want, they can be very diverse, they are free to make their own decisions, and it's not very easy to force them to stay at home and to live in the rules that are not seen in democratic countries on a big scale. And within the last decades, we didn't have something like this. For example, in Poland, when I'm from, it's much easier because we've been having communism and hard times just 30 years ago. So people, like my parents, faced this situation where you have to stay at home and you cannot leave your apartment in certain hours. But in Germany, I would say, or in France, or in Italy, or in Spain, it's much harder to force people to do this, simply because people are not used to experience even this type of confinement. So that's why I think this perception in different countries is it's very different. Of course, we'll be able to have more tests and to be more secure, but we'll see how this is going to happen. I see the next question. Do I think that the public perception to the importance of the health sector will change? Well, I think that the perception will change because people are going to need more centralized healthcare to be able to have pure access to the information. And especially, I've talked about it with my students about the AI influence and I would say huge growth of the e-health sector, simply because imagine that a cure will be found for the coronavirus someday, let's say in a couple of months, and with current doctors, their access to network, their access to internet. Of course, we can distribute this information with the solution, but it's not very easy. But imagine if we had AI system in healthcare, you can distribute this information to as many AI systems as you want. They could be, I don't know, 7 billion even AI systems. Imagine there is one per every person on Earth, and this information could be distributed live in the real time. With the physical sector, healthcare sector that it's seen right now, it's going to take time. It's going to take time, especially in developing countries. It's going to take much more time. It's going to be maybe quite fast in the countries like France, Germany, US. But think about African countries. Think about some Asian countries that are developing countries where the access to real-time information, real-time solutions, and the medical supplies is not that easy. Could it will affect China market? Like I heard that Japan are trying to withdraw from Chinese market. I don't think that it's going to be possible to disconnect from the Chinese market, not in the short run. Maybe in the long run, there's going to be some changes seen, but I would have to see this situation that we got used to, that we are able to produce cheaper stuff in China, for example. So although it's quite a popular trend right now that we should look at our supplier that is much closer than China, or somebody who's local, that appreciate local production, especially in France. It's quite hard trend to say that we should appreciate this product made in France. But this product made in France, they have different price than the products from China, and not everyone in the society would afford to pay this premium price on this. So we should think about it from the perspective that we should take into account that not everyone will be able to pay this higher price. If nothing, Jules asks me a question. If nothing changes, do I think we'll face worse in the coming years? I think that definitely we're going to see in the couple of years definitely changes on the global scale, different patterns of behavior. We have a lot of industries like transport, like tourism, like restaurants, food and beverage. They're going to be reshaped completely. And one of these trends, when it's about traveling and vacation, many people also in the society with future studies, they say that maybe we're going to turn into local tourism. We're not gonna have this need to spend our vacation in Thailand, in Vietnam, in China, or somewhere abroad. We're gonna appreciate something what's around us much more than ever before. So we should see these elements of approaching, and I would say also being grateful for the local perspective that we have around us. So I think that these coming years will let us live a little bit different way. And Ruksham also asks me a question. If we're looking at the Indian market during pandemic, for example, Hyundai, as it's mentioned, some of the Japanese companies. Well, definitely, if it's about automotive, hard to see the differences. Definitely, we're gonna have huge decrease in sales of the cars, because it's not our primary need, and this is not where we're gonna be spending our money. We need to make sure that we are secured right now, and even if lockdown stops, a lot of people, especially this year, will be preparing, because there's a lot of information from a scientist that show that maybe a second outbreak we're facing in something around autumn, winter this year. So I think that we will be getting ready just in case for the collapse scenario that something bad's gonna happen. So I think that the global downturn will be seen in 2020, and if this year, this autumn, this winter will be survived without second outbreak of the coronavirus, maybe we'll try to boost up our needs again. But I don't think that we're going to see it on a different scale. We can see some stores opening in some countries like Austria, like Germany. We can see also that Sweden has different approach. But imagine that you're going to buy some clothes, and imagine that you're going to H&M, for example, if it reopens. You want to buy a sweater, but you cannot put it on. You cannot try it on, because this is forbidden due to limitations after the coronavirus. You can look at the product and you can buy it. Later you can return it, but you cannot try it on. That's something completely different. And this is just a simple example that we're going to face a lot of areas of our life from a different perspective, not only this. Do I think that the global response should be more serious or it's adequate? Hard to say. Question is too general. Different countries have different approach. For example, some countries like UK, like US, they're planning to have a huge increase in terms of testing people, up to 100,000 people per week of tests. We'll see how it's gonna go. But what I really appreciate today, that what we were fighting for, to have less borders around the world in general, that the collaboration and collaborative economy is quite stronger. When China had problem, we were sending doctors to China to help them out to survive the virus. When Italy was in dramatic situation, doctors from China were going to Italy to help them out somehow. So we'll see a lot of countries helping each other in order to make sure that we're gonna recover from this situation very fast. And I see I have no more questions, and we reached our time slot for this very close, very short video conference. I wanted to thank you very much for joining me. I hope that it was interesting to see how the coronavirus changes our lives today. Once again, thank you everyone from Paris School of Business, which is the place where I work. So thank you everyone for supporting me to make this webinar happen. Thank you again for the technical team who supported me on every single time. Once again, Azure Gaptini, thank you very much for allowing me to make this happen in some kind of short and online way. I hope that we're gonna meet soon, if not live. We'll probably have more events like this going online. Thank you very much. Stay safe, stay at home, look after you, and I hope that we'll be able to see each other in live. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Goodbye.